depicts what would normally be just a yellow wall with some lines, some texture to it. I believe there's some drain pipes also hanging off the wall, but I photographed it in a way that the yellow just comes out so vibrant and so powerful that it just draws you right in. And I believe I used a fisheye lens on that as well, which created some of the distortion a little bit. And I get the questions all the time from people if I do, if some of this is created by post-production, but it's all done on camera. There are some basic touch-ups after in terms of color adjustment.
So we're going to go. I'm sure some people who are here in the audience are going to want to know more about that,
sure.
And I'm going to let them ask a question in a minute. But you mentioned double exposure. Is it safe to say fading dock is one of those that really took advantage of double exposure?
It is, and the really interesting part about that image is it's actually the same structure as Slippery, and as well as the image next to it across the other side, which I forgot to mention before. All three are the same dock, just taken from a different perspective. And I go to another level with it with fading dock and creating the multiple exposure. And in digital photography, since you're not shooting film, I'm not quite sure if I invented this, but I might have. I haven't heard of anybody else really doing this. I created my own form of creating a multiple exposure while doing digital photography. What I'll do is I'll set the camera at the long exposure, and because I can't really close it, I'll cover it with a hand and move it. I'll cover it and hold it for 5 seconds. Let that exposure happen. I'll cover it and move it to another level and let that happen, and cover it to a third or a fourth or a fifth. And it just creates layers, and depending on the amount of time, like there'll be certain areas that are kind of faded out, and in fading dock, I really get the feel of almost a Japanese painting, and I find it to be quite beautiful. And again, I love all my photos, but that truly is one of my favorites.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael. I think we would like to open it up to the audience. There might be, hopefully, a few questions.
A couple of things that I wanted to maybe say before I ask a question on that. And it's just a reaction to the work. I'm sure you kind of get that often. But before hearing you and seeing you, if I'm just looking at the work, I'm thinking that it has a very quiet, look about it. It's very still. It sort of makes me want to be still when I see it. Deliberate. I get sort of a sense of it. So there's a very deliberate, quiet, very studied sort of a look that's happening there. In other words, it's not random in that respect. There does appear to be an accidental quality to it also, and then hearing what you're saying about some of the ways you work, sometimes with certain subjects, there would certainly be that in it, I would think, for you. So a question that comes to mind then is, the process that you go through, whatever that process is, and you might let us know about what that process is in itself. But how important is that to you? I'm a photographer myself. One of the things that I enjoy most about what it is when I'm out there working is, of course, that moment that I'm working. And then I have something to take away from that moment. That means something to me also, but it doesn't always mean as much to me as that time when I'm working on that, when I'm attempting something. Sure. That means a lot to me, and occasionally in the end. So I'm curious then whether or not, how you feel about that process of working and what that means to you.
My process is extremely important to me, and I feel my technique makes it extremely unique, and I continue repeating this process in order to keep it consistent so my work can be recognizable. In terms of mistake, there are some mistakes that kind of happen by accident, but that happens all the time in photography. If I'm shooting during a day at a regular exposure, I'll be taking snapshots or shooting really quickly, and you'll catch an emotion or catch a moment that that might have been by accident, but you really like it. You're looking at that contact sheet, but the one that didn't mean to happen did, and that ended up being your favorite. But everything is really deliberate. I'll pick out a specific location that I'd like to concentrate on, whether it will be a specific neighborhood or traveling to another city, and just try to bring out something unique. Try to look at it from a different perspective. Recently, I went to Coney Island to do some photography, which has been done, by millions, and I don't know how many people have photographed it, but I really went there looking to really take the photos in a way that no one has before, and not, just look at the photos that I was, looking at in freshman college. I brought the multiple exposures in. I'm just a little stumped here.
Well, is down below one of the Coney Island shoots?
That one was in Mexico, which
But it's
was
similar what you were trying to do with the docks and at that point.
on one of my shoots, yeah.
Well, I think one of the other things that Tom was saying, if I may help, is that about the calmness that you're creating a lot of tranquility in your shots, and for one, here you have the Fuji sundown, which is on canvas. You have what I think is you can speak to. That was obviously a very planned and had to be meticulous about where you wanted the sun to be. Also, the one I found very interesting. Another one was the Locked Up, I believe it is, or is that Growth, the one that looks like it's a Japanese garden. It looks like a rock garden, and it has Japanese. It was shot down to the ground. So maybe if you want to talk a little bit about it seems to be you're drawn to it's sometimes very quiet scenery, yeah, but at the same time, it's monumental. What you're creating is another world. It's another world of whatever that.
Sure. In reference to the image Growth, sure. In reality, I was, shooting straight down at the street, and there was a small coin and a little bit of greenery coming up, but like the detail and the richness of the image, there's a little bit of water, and you can see every detail of that really draws me in, creating, beauty or uniqueness from something that might normally not be.
Right.
Is something that I love to do and is a huge part of my work.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment. I'm just really impressed by your work. I especially love the patterns, the repeated patterns in your work, and I look for some of the same things in my own photography. I guess my question is, what inspires you? Do you go out with your camera and just start looking for things that inspire you, or do you go with a concept already in mind and look for something? I know as photographers, you get to pick and find things that probably no one else notices, but are you going for an image that you already have in your mind and trying to look for different ways of finding it, or do you go out and find things and create the image based on that?
It's kind of a little of both. I'll say specifically, I'm going to shoot in the Lower East Side tonight. And I'll know I'm going there. And there'll be a few spots that I kind of, I saw the week before, and I'm like, I have to go back and photograph that, But I'm very observant. I'll be looking up, looking down. I tend to think, like all us photographers, notice some things that other people might be oblivious to. Just, a beautiful wall, that you just want to zoom into the texture of something, So a little of both. I have my technique. I know how I'm gonna shoot, but in terms of the long exposures but depending on what type of shoot it is, if I decide to shoot architecture or I'm traveling and doing a lot of landscape, it'll come out a little different. But a lot of it's spontaneous, and it's just kind of, since I shoot digitally, I'm able to see how it's coming out, and I'll really like something and I'll try it from several different angles or several different exposures. I'll bracket and I'll make sure that that image is perfect, or I'll have 10 images from the same place that I absolutely like.
Can I ask you, do you miss the excitement of seeing it develop in front of you instead of being in, or is that being in the moment better for you at the moment, that you're in the field and you have a chance to make it a little bit better? Or?
I do and I don't, I do miss getting my hands dirty when I was shooting black and white and just, getting in the darkroom and doing that. And
Go ahead.
And printing color as well. But there was also that anxiety. I go on this shoot and I come back, and I always, when I first started, I'd run back and develop it as quickly as possible. I was always nervous, like how they come out. I just want to see it instantaneously. And with digital, I have the ability to correct my mistakes if I make them, which I've developed a pattern. I always know what I'm going to do, and I work with the same lens. It's kind of a really wide 12 millimeter lens, so I kind of have an idea of how they're going to come out. But digital definitely gives me a little more wiggle room, which I like, and I'm doing the same things I was before, faster and a little more efficiently. So I have, especially I also do some professional work, and it helps a lot with deadlines and as well.
Whether you have the shot or not before you leave the scene. Another question, Tom?
Yeah, just maybe a follow-up to the what
Sure.
I was calling the sort of the quietness that I see in your work anyway. I noticed that, and I might be wrong in this, but I didn't notice any people that are there. So I was wondering whether that's a byproduct of the process, a long exposure, and if anybody's moving, you might not be able to see them, or if that's an intentional thing on your part, because you're focusing on, no pun intended, you're focusing on other elements and simply not people.
It's funny that you asked that. It has been intentional. I haven't been applying people into my photos and just concentrating on, the architecture, the building, or the landscape, or whatever I happen to be photographing. But within the last 3 weeks, I've actually invited people into this process. I was in Belmar, New Jersey on a beach, and I had my girlfriend pose for me on the beach at 10 o'clock at night, and she was nice enough to stand still for 30 seconds for me, and it came out outstanding. Thank you.
Well, on that note, if I may.
So I plan on I'm going to continue with what I'm doing. I don't plan on exclusively shooting people, but it's going to be mixed in from time to time as I continue. Thank you.
Well, we're winding down. We're under a minute, and I want to just thank you for, one, taking the time and agreeing to bringing your work up. It's not an easy thing to come all the way up, and this is your first show in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And we are in the 5 College area, and we're going to be promoting this widely, and we hope to continue to bring people in to see your work. And we want to make sure that you are always welcome to come back, and we love it. So far, the feedback's been great, Mike, so thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. I look forward to it.
Thank you for joining Art Talk, and we hope to see you again in the future. Good night.